Hi everyone. So today in this video I am going to discuss about one of the important testing topic, that is test scenario. So in your career or in your testing life, many time many people many people they can tell about this name, that is test scenario. So suppose in your test lead may ask you that can you please give me or can you please write some test scenario for that particular application or particular module, right? Or you are, or maybe in your client, maybe they can request you that can you please give me some test scenario for that particular module, right? So test scenario is one of the important topic of testing. So all we know about that, what is test scenario and how we can write the test scenario. Okay, so in this video I'm going to discuss about all these things step by step, and that is very easy. Okay, so now let's talk about that. What do you mean by test scenario? So test scenario means any functionality that can be tested. Means suppose I am giving you one example. Let's say Flipkart. Okay, let's say Flipkart. So Flipkart, suppose I am searching like here mobile. Okay, and enter searching. So I am searching the mobile. So that means whenever I am searching the mobile, all the mobiles are listed here. That means it's a test scenario. Okay, so any functionality that can be tested, that is called as test scenario. Clear? Now test scenario is also called as test condition or test possibility. So as a tester, you should put yourself in the end user shoes and figure out the real world scenarios and use cases of the application under test. So suppose I am a tester and I am just testing on that particular searching functionality. So for that particular searching functionality, I have to think about that what the customer or what the real user, how the real user can use that particular search functionality. So that means I have to put, or I have to put myself in the end user shoes and figure out the real world scenarios. Okay, so this scenario guide as a user on what to test. So in a simple term, we can say that test scenario means what to test. Means we are testing the searching functionality. So what to test? That is nothing but test scenario. Means we are logging that application. So that is what to test. Means what we are testing. That is test scenario. Okay. So in a simple term, we can say that test scenario means what to test. Now, next question comes up in your mind that who written or who write the test scenarios? Who are responsible to write the test scenario or who are responsible to create the test scenario? So remember that the tester, obviously tester can write the test scenario, or the test lead can write the test scenario, or the business analyst can write the test scenario. So test scenarios are written by test lead, business analyst and testers. So that is a small description or small definitions that what is mean by test scenario. So test scenario means any functionality that can be tested. And also we can say that in a simple term that what to test. Okay. And also it is also called as test condition and test possibility. So as a tester, always we should put ourselves, or we should put yourself in the end user shoes and figure out that the real world scenarios and use cases of any application under test. Okay, and who who are responsible to create the test scenario? The test lead, the business analyst, and obviously the testers are responsible to create the test scenarios. Now coming to next one is that whenever we are talking about the test scenario, so obviously one thing that we have to remember that there is one term that is called as scenario testing. So we all know that. Now we are very much clear about that what is test scenario. Now next question is that in your interview, interviewer can ask you that what do you mean by scenario testing. So basically the test scenario and the scenario testing both are different things. Scenario testing means it whenever actually scenario testing is a method. Okay, scenario testing is a method where the actual scenarios are used for testing any software application instead of test case. So whenever we are testing any application or any actual scenarios which are used for testing for any application instead of test case, that is called as scenario testing. So scenario testing in software testing is a method in which the actual scenarios are used for testing the software application instead of test cases. Now, what is the purpose of use the scenario testing? So the main purpose of the scenario testing is to test end-to-end scenarios for a specific complex problem of a software. So when we are going for the scenario testing, if there is any complex problem in my software, then we have to go for the scenario testing. So the main purpose of the scenario testing is to test end-to-end scenarios. So when we are talking about the end-to-end scenarios, that it comes under the scenario testing. So in scenario testing, we are going to test end-to-end scenario for any specific complex problem in any software. Okay, so scenarios, obviously whenever we are talking about the scenarios, mean lots of scenario can be happen. So scenarios basically helps in an easier way to test and evaluate end-to-end complicated application or complicated problem. So scenario testing means it's a software testing method in which the actual scenarios are used to testing the software application instead of test cases. So apart from the test cases, whenever we are testing any application, apart from the test cases, whenever we are testing any application end to end, that is called as scenario testing. Now, let's say I am showing you one simple thing. Okay, so suppose this is one scenario. Okay, and the scenario name is, let's say it's a login. It's a login page. So it's a login page. So in that login page, so what is my scenario? My scenario is that login page is working perfectly or not. So that is my scenario. Okay, so my scenario is that login page is working perfectly fine or not. So on that login page, there should be lots of test cases. So maybe I'm just thinking that there are 4 test cases. 1, 2, 3, 4. So for one scenario, so it's a basically it's a scenario. It's a scenario. Okay, or we can say it's a test scenario. So it's a test scenario, and these are all the test cases. These are all the test case. Also a test case. This is also the test case, and this is also the test case. So one scenario, multiple test case. That is the, I mean, we all know about that. So one scenario, suppose login page is working perfectly fine or not. So that is my scenario. That is my test scenario. And under that test scenario, lots of test cases are there. So in my previous video, in my upcoming videos or in my upcoming lecture, I will show one by one by example, by real life example. Okay. So as of now, so my scenario is that, my test scenario is that login page is working perfectly fine or not. So in that login page, so suppose I am taking this Flipkart, and that Flipkart, this is my login page. So in that login page, maybe there are lots of test cases are there. Suppose enter correct. Suppose I am putting some email here. So enter correct email. Okay. Then enter space or enter any blank, enter any invalid email and click on the request OTP. So lots of test cases are there. So one scenario are consist of lots of test cases. Okay, so my concern is that, so scenario testing means, so whenever we are not testing any types of test cases, so instead of test case, apart from any test case, so apart from any test case, whenever we are testing end to end for any application, any complex application, any complex problem, that is called as scenario testing. Okay, so now you guys are very much clear about that. What do you mean by scenario testing? And it is also one of the important interview questions also. So interviewer, maximum time interviewer can ask you that, what do you mean by scenario testing? So you have to remember that test scenario and the scenario testing, both are the different. Test scenario means any functionality that can be tested, but scenario testing means it's a software testing. Scenario testing is a method in which the actual scenarios are used for testing the software application instead of test cases. That is called as scenario testing. Okay, so now I'm giving you one example of test scenarios, so it will be, more clear for you. So example of test scenario, let's say this is my Flipkart application. Okay, so in that Flipkart application, so one test scenario, so I'm writing it here. So scenario 1, so scenario 1. So scenario 1, making it some, okay, scenario 1. So scenario 1, what is the scenario 1? Check the login functionality. Check the login functionality. So that is one scenario. So that is one scenario. So check the login functionality is the one test scenario. We can write it like test scenario. So this is one test scenario. So now let's say I have logged in. I have already logged in. So now, so what we'll do, we can search that application or we can search any product. Okay. So what would be my second test scenario? Take a second test scenario, maybe like scenario. So I'm copying it here. So my second test scenario will be we can say check the search functionality. Search functionality. So that is my second test scenario. Okay, of any e-commerce application. I am just giving you one example to understand that what exactly is test scenario. And let's say one more test scenario is there, that is test scenario 3. And the test scenario 3 is that, suppose so I am just clicking one product. So let's say it's a product description page. Okay, so check the product description page. So check the product description page. Okay, so just assume that I have only the 3 test scenario. Okay, just assume lots of test scenarios there, but for example I am just assuming that in my application 3 test scenarios there. One is the check the login functionality, scenario 2 is the check the search functionality, and third one is the check the product description page. Okay, now so in that login functionality, lots of test cases should be there. So lots of test cases are there. N number of test cases should be there. Like enter correct username. So let's say it's my login page. So enter correct username and click on request OTP button. Enter wrong username or wrong email, click on request OTP button. Enter blank email, click on request OTP button. So lots of test cases should be there. Okay, so one test scenario can hold lots of test cases. One test scenario can hold lots of test cases. Same for the test scenario 2, that is check the search functionality. So we can search here by giving null value. So nothing is there and we are searching. Or suppose we are giving some space, then we are writing something and then we are searching. So lots of test scenarios, lots of test cases can be happen. Okay, so my concern is that one test scenario can hold multiple test cases. So what is my test scenario? What to test? What we are testing? we are testing our main agenda is that we are testing the login functionality. Now whenever we are testing the login functionality, lots of test cases can be there. Okay, so the example of test scenario, so that is the perfect example of any test scenarios. Okay, now next question is that why we create the test scenario. Why we create the test scenario. Now if we create the test scenario, so obviously it it ensures us that we have completed the 100% test case coverage. Because whenever we are writing the test scenario, so lots of functionality we are covering. So not only the lots of, all the functionality we are covering, that what to test. So in that e-commerce application, what to test, so everything we are completing, right? So basically, why we create test scenario? So creating test scenarios ensure us that complete test case coverage. Okay, and the point number 2. So test scenarios can be approved by various stakeholder like business analyst, developer, customer, to ensure the application under test is thoroughly tested. And it ensures that the software is working for the most common use cases. So obviously, whenever we are developing any software, or whenever we are testing any software, our main aim is that whatever the client has given the requirement to us, we have to satisfy that. We need to satisfy. Okay, and whenever as a tester, whenever I am testing that application, always I have to remember that I have to break the software by using lots of negative test cases, lots of negative scenario, lots of negative testing. Okay, so in my previous videos, positive testing and negative testing videos, I have already discussed about that. So whenever we are writing the test scenarios, means we are covering all the what to test thing. Okay, so that means always it ensures that the software is working for the most common use cases. So that's why I am already told in my what is test scenarios definition, that as a tester you should put yourself in the end user shoes and figure out the real world scenarios and use cases. Okay, so test scenarios can ensure that the software is working for the most common use cases. And the number three is that they serve as a quick tool to determine the testing work effort and accordingly create a proposal for the client or organize the workforce. Then they help to determine the most important end-to-end transaction or the real use of any software application, or they can for studying the end-to-end functioning of the program. So for that case, so test scenario is critical. Okay, so why we create test scenario? Lots of things are there to create in the test scenario. So one of the important is that if we create the test scenarios, so we can complete the 100% test coverage. So that is the main one thing. And also the second important thing is that it ensures that the software is working for the most common use case. Okay, so this is the reason that why we create the test scenarios. Now next thing is that if we are not creating test scenario, then what will happen? Or we can say that when not to create scenario, when we are not creating the test scenarios. So whenever the application is complicated, so whenever the application under test is complicated, so then we are not creating the test scenarios. Then whenever the application under test is unstable, then we are not creating the test scenarios. And when we have very small time to deliver the software, then we are not creating any test scenarios. Say for example, suppose I am testing the product description page, and for that product description page I have only one day to test. So for that one day, it is not possible to write all the test scenarios then test. So whenever we have a lot whenever we have a less time to deliver any project or any software, then we will be not creating any kinds of test scenarios. So whenever the application under test is complicated, whenever it is unstable, and whenever we have very less time to hand over the project to the customer client, then we are not creating the test scenarios. Then next, when the project the project that follows agile methodology, means, or we can say that in that agile methodology like Scrum, Kanban. So basic thing is that if we are following the agile methodology, then we are not creating the test scenario. So for that agile methodology, so we have a very less time, and there is a one concept is that sprint. So whenever I am teach you that what is Scrum model or what is agile model or what is Scrum process. So in that videos you can understand that thing, that what is sprint, etc, etc. So as of now, in a very simple term, so agile methodology, if we follow the agile methodology, then we are not creating any test scenarios, because in that agile methodology, as we are following the Scrum or Kanban process, so for that suppose we have one module, let's say login module. So in that login module, so for that login module deliver, so what is basically done in agile model or agile methodology? In that agile methodology, the whole, like waterfall model or others model, what is happen? So whole part or whole project is submitted to the client after ending our development process, our testing process, everything. Whenever everything is done, then we will hand over that software to the customer. But in agile model, no, that is not like that in agile model. So agile model, small part of any software we are going to deploy, or we are going to hand over to the client. So suppose this is that is the module, login module. So whenever the login module will be done, then we will deploy that to the live. Okay, so we will deploy that to the live environment. So means, so that is the concept of the agile model. So in that agile model, both developer and tester will work simultaneously, and it's a very less time to hand over one small part of a project to the customer. So that's why if we are using the agile methodology, then we will not create any kinds of test scenarios. And also whenever any new bug fix or for any kinds of regression testing, then we are not creating the test scenarios. Okay, so the 5 reason is there for why we not create or when not to create test scenarios. One is that when the application is complicated, when the application under test is unstable, whenever we have less time to hand over that software to the customer. Then next, if our project is follow the agile methodology, and also when any new bug fix or for any kinds of regression testing, we are not creating the test scenarios. Okay, now next thing is that how to write the test scenarios. So that is the important thing, that how to create test scenarios or how to write the test scenario. So in my video, I will just give you some step that how to write test scenarios. In my next video, I will be showing one Excel sheet. Okay, one Excel sheet with some real life example that how to create the test scenarios. Okay, so now how to write test scenario. So step 1 is that read the requirement documents like business requirement specification, software requirement specification, functional requirement specification, or SUT means system under test. So everything we have to read carefully, means BRS, SRS, FRS. So everything, so all of these things we need to read very carefully. And you could also refer the use cases, any books, any manuals, okay, that of the application to be tested. So that is the first step, that whatever whatever is in our hand, maybe BRS, maybe SRS, maybe FRS, maybe any documents, maybe any use cases, maybe any books, any manuals, we have to read that very carefully. That is the first step. And second step is that for each requirement, figure out the possible user actions and objectives. So whatever the possible user action or objectives are there, we have to figure out that and determine the technical aspect of the requirement. And we can say the possible scenario of the system abuse and evaluate the user with hacker mindset. Okay, so the possible, the requirement, for each requirement, we have to figure out the possible user action and objectives. Okay, and also we have to determine the technical aspects of the requirement. Now, step number 3, after reading the requirement document or after reading the BRS, SRS or FRS, then doing your analysis. Now you have to analyze that what you have read and list out the different test scenarios that verify each feature of the software. So suppose in our hand we have a system requirement specification, or we have a business requirement specification. So we have to read very carefully that business requirement specification, and then we have to analyze that, and then we have to list out the different test scenarios that verify each feature of the software. So that is the step number 3. Now step number 4, once you have listed all the possible test scenarios, then we have to create the testability matrix or RTM. That means requirement testability matrix. So what is requirement testability matrix? I will give you a brief idea in my upcoming videos. Don't worry about that. Okay. So in a simple term, testability matrix means in a document where our test cases and the business logic where documented. So our test cases and the business scenarios, in which place, or in a document, if we documented our test cases and the business scenarios or use cases in a single page, that is called as a requirement testability matrix. That means we have to mapping our test cases and the customer business requirement, okay, in a single document. That is called as a requirement testability matrix. So whenever we have listed all the possible test scenarios, then we have to create the testability matrix, and we have to verify each and every requirement has a corresponding test scenarios. Okay, then step number 5, the test scenarios created are reviewed by our supervisor, like test lead or business analyst. So whenever we have completed our test scenarios, then obviously we have to someone is there who will review our test cases, or who will review our test scenarios. Now who will review our test scenarios? The test lead, or in my supervisor, or my business analyst. They can review our created test scenarios, and later they are also reviewed by, and so that is reviewed by our internal, our in-house team, my team lead, my business analyst, or my supervisor. They can review my test case, my test scenarios. So whenever they are completed to review my test scenarios, then obviously in later the stakeholder or the product owner can also review our test scenarios. So if we do like that, then we can make sure that we will deliver one bug-free software, because in the test scenarios we are covered everything what to test, right? So these are the 5 steps that how to write test scenarios. So one is that we have to read the document, maybe the BRS, maybe the SRS, maybe the FRS very carefully. Okay, then whenever we have after the reading of that BRS or FRS, then we have to figure out all the possible user actions and objectives. Then after reading the requirement document, then we have to do some analyze, we have to do some analyzation, and we have to list out the different test scenarios, and we have to verify each and every feature of the software. Then whenever our analyzation is done, analyze part is done, then we have to list out all the possible test scenarios, and we have to create one traceability matrix to verify that each and every requirement has a corresponding test scenarios. And then after creating the test scenarios, after creating the RTM, after checking the mapping, whenever all is done, then our test scenarios will be reviewed by our supervisor or our test lead or our business analyst. So later it can be checked by the stakeholder or product owner also. Okay, so this is the thing, that how to write the test scenarios. Now, whenever we are creating the test scenarios, there is some tips is there. So it is very much important. So whenever you guys are creating the test scenario, obviously you have to remember that thing. So 4 steps or 4 tips are there that you should remember. Okay, so first one is that whenever we are writing the test scenarios, that should be correct. So any wrong scenario can mislead us. Okay, so that's why be careful whenever you are writing any test scenarios, that should be correct. And obviously that should be simple and understandable. Suppose I have written already one test scenarios, and now you are the one newcomer or new employees in my project, or new tester in my project. So whenever you are reviewing my test scenario, if that is not understandable, then how you can test, right? So always remember, the test scenarios should be simple and understandable. And number 3, the test scenario should cover both positive and negative scenarios. That is the very important thing. Whenever we are creating any test scenario, we have to make sure that we have covered both positive and negative test scenarios. Then number 4, should be create at least one test scenario for one requirement or user story. Suppose we have a requirement is the login functionality. So whenever the login functionality is there, that is one user story, that is one requirement. So for that one requirement, we have to make sure that we have written we have written one test scenario. At least one test scenario we have to written for any user story. So that 4 thing we have to remember, and that is a simple tips. Whenever you guys are creating any test scenarios, you have to remember these things. That is, whenever we are writing any test scenario, that should be correct. Then second one is that should be simple and understandable for everyone. Then third, should cover both positive and negative test scenarios. And fourth, should create at least one test scenarios for one requirement or user story. Okay, so these are the tips that how to create test scenarios. Now, next one is that what are the advantages of writing test scenarios? So obviously, so as of now, we can conclude that thing. So lots of advantages are there for the creating test scenario. Like the first one is that it's a time-saving activity, because it's a very simple term. So whenever we are and make sure one thing, that whenever we are writing any test scenarios, that should be one line statement. Means in my test scenarios definition, what I have told you guys, that what to test. So very simple, what to test means example. In my example, I have already written something that check the login functionality. Means it's a one line statement. So test scenario should be simple. It's a one line one line statement. Means, so if test scenario is a one line statement, then the advantage is that it's a time saving activity. Number 2, scenario testing may be completed considerably faster than the test case testing, because I have already I have done something that I have done something that one test scenario can consist of lots of test cases, multiple test cases. So scenario testing means we are not testing the test case. So instead of test case, whenever we are doing end-to-end testing for any complicated application, that is the scenario testing, right? So scenario testing may be completed considerably faster than test case testing. Okay, now test scenarios allows for complete test coverage since the test case are derived from the user requirements. Okay, then test scenarios are derived from the user requirement or user stories, so it goods give test coverage. So these two are same, because as test scenarios coming from the user requirement, then obviously it gives us good test coverage. And also, as we are writing the both positive and negative test scenarios, then we can say that we can complete 100% test coverage. Okay, and next one is that test scenarios are one liner statement, that I've already told you in that first point, that test scenarios are one line statement, so it reduces the complexity and redundancy. So these are the advantages of test scenarios. Okay, so now guys, I think you guys are very much clear about that. What do you mean by test scenarios? What is scenario testing? What is the best example for test scenarios and how to create test scenarios? So lots of things we have already covered. Okay, so and in your corporate life, the test scenario is the main thing. So we can say it's a engine. Okay, so test scenario is the engine. Okay, or we can say test scenario is the heart. So we all know about in very detail what is test scenarios. Okay, and make sure whenever you are going for any interview, interviewer can ask you, that is 99% chances there, that what do you mean by test scenarios, or what is the difference between test case and test scenarios. So I will discuss everything one by one. So today's topic or today's agenda is there. Agenda was that what is test scenario. So in my upcoming video, I'll cover everything step by step with very easy understanding. Okay, so I think this video will be very helpful to you guys, and in my upcoming video I will show you with some real live practical example that how to create test scenarios by using Excel sheet. Okay, so if you guys like my videos, one thumbs up please, and share this video to your friends, and subscribe to my channel EduPaat, and stay with me. So see you in the next videos with some another topic of software testing. Thank you.